morning, everyone. I am Tegan Bartos, founder of Jolt Your Career, and today I'm talking about cannabis in corporate America and just in general, the industry. My guest, Isabella, will be joining me today, but before I bring her on, I just want to talk about a couple of things. Everybody's wondering, where did the jobs go? Where did the people go? And now as things are opening back up, you've noticed a lot of hospitality industries are short for staff, whether that be restaurants, hotels, customer service, etc. And the cannabis industry created 80,000 jobs last year. And when a lot of those individuals were furloughed, a lot of people went to the cannabis industry. And it's something that senior level leaders typically aren't sure whether or not they want to go because maybe there's a stigma attached, or maybe they're not really sure about the startup industry. So I'm going to go ahead and bring on my guest, and we're just going to chat about some of the different things that are going on in the industry to break down some of the stigmas attached to the industry and to, get everybody excited about the opportunities that there are for not only employment, but also just society in general in terms of decriminalizing and things of that nature. So let me bring on Isabella.
Good morning, guys. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello there. Good morning. Thank you, Tegan. I'm really excited to be here. I really like the background. I think you gave a great intro. And yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, Isabella, for those of the viewers who are watching who do not know you, go ahead and share a little bit about your background, about your business, and how you're involved in the industry.
Yes, so I am involved in the industry as a content creator. So I have built all of my relationships with different cannabis businesses, dispensaries, manufacturing, packaging, and processing, all through LinkedIn and all through the content that I've created. So I just make different videos and post them on LinkedIn talking about different things that are happening in the industry. For example, how New York is projecting to make 245 million in tax revenue by 2024. So I create content related to different articles, different things, different updates that are happening, and that way I connect with different cannabis businesses. I also help them gain access to financial resources that they normally wouldn't have access to because of the gray area that exists between the federal and the state level. So that's a little bit about me. I'm not a pro. I did not study finance, so I really come at the industry from a media point of view. So I like to highlight things that are going on. There's a lot of consumer content out there. So people who just post themselves smoking weed, doing edibles. So there's a lot of that kind of consumer content. So my angle is to talk about different things that are happening and interview different business owners and give them the opportunity to shine the limelight. So that's a little bit about me.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. And so one of the things that I've noticed, because I work primarily with mid to senior level leaders who are looking to take the next step in their career. And I've noticed that some people are hesitant to get involved in the industry. And it's interesting because one of my clients, in addition to, resume writing and career coaching and things like that, I've just gotten involved in a couple of startups just because they needed help, getting their marketing material together to present to private equity firms or private investors and things like that. So, they needed their resume, they needed their portfolios, all of that kind of marketing material. So I kind of got involved in the cannabis industry that way. And it's fascinating, the United States is kind of behind a little bit on the curve compared to Europe and say like even just our neighbor next door in Canada. And there's a lot of lessons to be learned. And so in America, one of the things that I see is there's stigmas attached still to the cannabis industry. And that might be because it's not federally legalized. There's not as much research out there compared to, say other regulated
other forms of medicine.
Yeah, exactly. So do you see that? Do you see like, is there a stigma attached, or what's your
Yes,
on it?
I think there definitely is a stigma attached because a lot of the people who are in these positions of management and all these executive positions are of this older generation who grew up with the paradigm, with the perspective that cannabis was bad. The media also had a lot to do with what influenced people's perception on the use of cannabis. But I'd say in the last, I'd say 10 to 15 years, now that a lot of states have legalized, I think we're at like 32 states that have now legalized cannabis. There's a whole industry. It's international, so there's multinational corporations associated with it, and because I think that there's an economy behind it, people's perspective have now started to change.
Yeah.
We've seen the rise of hemp, of CBD, of all these alternative forms of medicine that are now posing a threat to, let's say, the pharmaceutical industry. So I'd say now there's a lot of smearing that's happening of cannabis. That's what I'd say big lobbying groups like the pharmaceutical industry or oil, or these big giants, these hegemon giants. That's it's a big word, but whatever. So yeah, these are the people that are kind of creating, like, that are perpetuating the stigma behind cannabis. But there is a strong grassroots movement, and there's a strong movement of people who support it. And as it refers to like cannabis corporate companies, I think that their culture is way more progressive. It is not as stringent, and I think people are choosing to work, as you were saying earlier, for the cannabis companies now more than before. And I think right now the current stigma today is that if you work for a cannabis company, you kind of have this tag, so it's like, oh, so now you work, you work with the potheads, like you work with weed, so now there's like this kind of mist that's associated with you because you work for a cannabis company.
Which is crazy because the cannabis industry, it's like you said, it is progressive. It's very technical. I mean, it's not just people like in mountains or, in some, they're like in buildings, and there's sophisticated lighting, and there's little sensors on each plant and stuff. It's crazy. So let's say hello to some of the people in the comments. So
Yes.
hey Gabe, good morning. For some people, it's the afternoon. We've got Elisen from South Africa. I think I said your name correctly. What's up, everyone? Good morning, good morning, good morning. So I think Kenneth says, I think there's less and less stigma about cannabis. And I'd have to agree because there's so much money in it. And so many politicians who previously were, criminalized are now running monopolies on the industry. It's like, oh, well, if before you were against it, and now, you're not only growing it, processing it, owning the labs that test it. I mean, it can't be all too bad. So yeah,
I think a lot of people's opinions
absolutely.
are being overturned just because you can't turn a blind eye to all of the opportunity that's behind it. There's also a whole generation of millennials, Gen Z, who grew up with it, who support it, and it's just negligent. And I think you're halting change by not adopting laws that are conducive to cannabis use and the commercialization of it. But I think now I guess on the industry side, what people have to be wary of is that there isn't like a creation of over regulation, because if you see right now with the federal laws right now, it's very complicated, and it's a whole ordeal for people to enter the cannabis industry and to navigate within it. So it's just a matter of the industry, of like us staying present, that the state can't create that many laws, too many laws, to make it too complicated.
Yeah, it is interesting to see how the laws are shifting, and it's interesting to see how the different states are bringing it out. So for example, like Ohio, people actually voted against it because they wanted more regulations in place to help to ensure that it wasn't swayed. And so I'm in Illinois, and if you follow Illinois politics, we're not the Windy City because of the wind. We're in the Windy City because of corruption. And so how the cannabis industry rolled out here, I mean, I think it was like $100,000 for the license. And it was like politicians and former police officers who got access to it first. And you have to have, so many different things where, like in Michigan, for example, they have different minority initiatives. They have different policies in place to decriminalize, to expunge people's records for
Mm-hmm.
like non-criminal cannabis use and things of that nature that has for so long affected so many families, particularly minorities, but just everybody in general. When you look at the criminal justice system in the United States, it's obvious who's being punished. It's not the rich white kid who, smokes weed before,
There's
they're
a
all
lot of
football
affluence.
game. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. And so there's a lot of, it's interesting to see how the the different states are creating their laws and how people in those states are demanding or not demanding accountability for how things are being rolled out. So it'll be so interesting to see, once it's at the federal level, what they're going to
Yeah,
end up doing.
I honestly think that's one of the main factors that's holding back the legalization is the fact that it's okay if we go ahead and federally legalize, what are we going to do with the millions and millions of people who have now been in jail for X amount of years, who have all these charges? There's this whole other wave of bureaucracy,
Yeah.
that's involved.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a sticky talking point because in the United States, our criminal justice system is a money making business, and so if you stop, if you decriminalize cannabis, which the majority of states have done, it impacts private prison systems, which are heavily tied with politics, and so let's reel this back in a little bit.
Yeah.
As one of the things that I found interesting is the different statistics in terms of like generations. And so 48% of millennials recreationally, yeah, it was, yeah, 48% of millennials recreationally use cannabis, where 13% of boomers recreationally use it, 21% of Gen Xers, 17% of Gen Zs, and 1% of the silent generation, which I'm not sure who they are, but evidently 1% of them, use cannabis. And it's interesting because cannabis is a plant, and there's THC, there's CBD, there's hemp
Mhm.
seeds. It's like, you go to an upscale restaurant and hemp seeds are being put on an organic salad. And then the same person who's eating that organic salad would, potentially judge someone else for THC use. So what are your thoughts on how different parts of the plant
I think
are
the
used?
cannabis has actually like hundreds of different cannabinoids. The ones that we've been able to extract are Delta 9, which is what we know as regular THC, and then there's Delta 8, which is a
Mm-hmm.
more mild version of cannabis, and then there's CBD, which is one of the other hundreds of cannabinoids. And I just think it's a lack of information that people have. So when they think of the hemp seeds, they're not making the association like with the regular plant.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just think there's a lack of information. Um, and I think it's one of the things that major cannabis dispensaries, like for example, Planet 13 or Cookies, they have a big educational movement behind. Like they don't just sell the product; they have a brand, but they also actively try to educate people on their products, on their origins, which is, I think, it's the best way to go about educating people who are ignorant.
Yeah, that's one of the things I like about your YouTube channel, and I'm putting it across the bottom now, is that you do take an educational approach, and it is something that we do need to be educated on, because for so long it hasn't been, it's been stigmatized. It's, evil people use cannabis or bad people use cannabis, and it's illegal and it's naughty, whatever it may
Hmm.
be. And really there are a lot of other purposes for it. And so I think it's really cool that in certain states, they've completely taken out the discrimination aspect of medicinal marijuana use, as well as a few states have even made it so employers can't discriminate against those who use medicinal use cannabis or
Hmm.
recreational use. And so there are big changes happening. I mean, like SHRM, that's one of the biggest HR organizations out there. they've got quite a few articles. I already posted one in the comments. And when it comes to cannabis use in corporate America, they're basically saying to organizations, maybe don't allow people to smoke on the job, but it just really is dependent on what your state is allowing for and what your company, feels comfortable with. And insurance plays a big part in it too, because like if you were to get into an accident where alcohol use, don't drink on the job, but cannabis use stays in your system a little bit longer. So there are some interesting like repercussions there when it comes down to it, that people need to be educated on, because say, you go overseas or you go to a state where it is legal and then 20 days later get into an accident, you may test positive. So have you seen any like concerns and things like that when it comes to employment or people's usage when it comes to the fact that it does stay in your system longer?
I think it honestly creates a very big gray area, as you were saying, because in some places it is legal medicinally. There, people also do have the opportunity to travel. I wouldn't be able to name a specific instance that I know of, but I do believe that the given that there's so much availability, and it's very the likelihood of your employees, let's say you're in Denver, like of your employees using cannabis, I don't think that factoring in that someone had cannabis in their system can negate them of their medical rights from their employer.
Yeah.
Simply because even through, let's say, secondhand smoke or just being around, it's just a city where it's prevalent. And I think that's the battle, and I think that's what insurance companies need to define.
Yeah, it's interesting how much work there still is left, and there's so much room for senior level professionals to get into the industry and leave their mark in terms of making sure best practices um, are brought into the space in the various states. And I did a case study for my cannabis client who, based off the research in Canada, and a lot of the Canadian cannabis companies that failed, it was because they didn't have the policies in place that were sustainable. And so I think we'll see that more and more. And then the cannabis companies that have been able to be successful is because they brought in fantastic talent. Cannabis industry isn't right for everybody because it very so much so is a very progressive and startup type of culture, which not everybody feels comfortable with. But for those who can, strive and thrive and in those types of situations, it's an opportunity to bring in some of that structure that sometimes startups don't have, and be really analytical and strategic when it comes to looking at policies that have worked elsewhere and not reinventing the wheel. I mean,
Yeah,
Europe.
just following the proven systems and processes. And I think it'll be really interesting to see the consulting efforts on the ends of all the of different corporations and how they work together with cannabis, because again, there's a lot of money to be made. And I think these companies need the structure, much like any other company. And you're right, they don't have the guidance.
Yeah. And not only like in corporate, like as these organizations begin to franchise or begin to grow, and like as different states become legal, like obviously because it's not federal, you can't cross state lines, but once it does, it's going to be interesting to see how that rolls out. But also in other industries, like just testing alone, there's a huge market for testing, transportation, security, in like the scientific community, all the research they're doing. Like Kenneth brought up, like the fact, like glaucoma treatments and stuff like that. Yeah, absolutely. Like there's so many medicinal purposes, and it is affecting big pharma, like you said. So there's some lobbying going on with that. But it'll be cool to see more research come out, the different benefits of it, the hundreds of different strands, which strand is best for sleep, anxiety, depression,
Yeah. And you
coma.
know what it is? It's actually there's a lot of consultation. So much like going to a doctor where you tell them your symptoms, also going to a dispensary and acquiring cannabis for certain, let's say it's anxiety or you have epilepsy, there are your bud tender, which is another component within the industry, bud tender education, so much like bartenders. So yeah, they take their time with each patient, and they diagnose you. All right, so you're looking for an uplifted feeling without the anxiety, without the paranoia. So it's just pairing. So
Yeah.
there's a big dialogue. So it's more personal than working, with, let's say, with the pharmaceutical industry or buying medicine.
Yeah,
It's a different
absolutely.
feeling.
My I've got a family member who decided that they wanted to try out medicinal, and then if you get the medical card, then you don't have to pay taxes as well. But she was saying, she tried a couple different things to figure out like what would work for her and what wouldn't work for her. And then, it took a little bit to figure it out, but like she feels different than any other medicine she's been prescribed before. And I think with Mental Health Awareness Month, all of these leaders on LinkedIn talking about, like I saw one lady and she said, I was diagnosed with bipolar. And previously to this diagnosis, I didn't realize that me staying up for 4 days straight was me in crisis or me having an episode. And then I just figured that like when I crashed, it was just burnout because as an executive and business owner, you going at that rate, you just didn't realize that there might be a mental health component behind it. And in addition to seeking therapy and various forms of medication, she explained that like cannabis use has really been helpful for her. And I think it's great that throughout this mental health month, so many leaders are coming out and saying, yes, this has been beneficial to me, and this is how it has helped me become the best version of myself because I was dealing with X, Y, or Z. I mean, sure, there's a regular recreational use, but then the medicinal purposes for it is really powerful. And so you want to say anything about that?
About the medicinal powers behind cannabis?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think like I was mentioning before, CBD, which has been on the rise for a couple of years now, is really I'd say more than THC. CBD is more impactful because there are a lot of people who will always have that stigma towards weed, like I will never smoke weed, I'll never consume it. But it's, hey, here are all the benefits and other properties behind the plant without the psychoactive component, which
Yeah.
is why you see so much of the older generation, more the baby boomers, who are actually the buyers of CBD. Surprisingly, not surprisingly.
I was just at a dog show and they have,
Oh, CBD pet industry. Oh my God.
yeah, the pet industry is booming. Like, how
Mm-hmm.
many dogs have glaucoma or hip dysplasia or, like little dogs where their knees pop out and stuff like that? And it's like, you can make your pet be more comfortable for longer. Like, I don't know if you're a pet owner, but
I am not. I'm a pseudo pet owner, but not a pet
okay.
owner.
Well, most pet owners will do anything for their pet. So it's so funny
Mm-hmm.
to see, like, even just like in the pet industry, how much it's booming. And like you can notice the differences on like, wow, like my dog is playing again or chasing a toy again. And so it's interesting to see like all the different things. It next week is massage. And I was at a cannabis convention and there's like the things that you rub on. What is it called?
A spread, an ointment.
Yeah, it's like a ball and you just rub it on,
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
like instead
Oh,
of
those
using
roller balls, the
yeah,
roller
the
ones.
roller balls.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, instead of
Mm-hmm.
using icy hot, it's in there and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, there's so many different usages for it. And like even when I was at the grocery store the other day, like the disposable plates, it's like, okay, well now there's hemp,
Yeah,
which is saving so many things.
what I think, and maybe it might be going way off field, is I think one of the reasons why the use of cannabis, and it's because it's more than just the plant and the extract. You can actually use the plant itself to make paper, and it's a renewable source of paper. It's
Yeah.
biodegradable. I think it's because of the paper industry and because of the firm grip that they have. Within society, that I think it's one of the reasons why they also lobby against cannabis.
Yeah, there's a lot going against the industry, but there also are a lot of opportunities, which I mean, we've covered so much in just the past 25 minutes. So
Mm-hmm.
As we begin to wrap up, I think, the general takeaway here is there still is a stigma, and there doesn't
Yes.
necessarily need to be. Isabella brought up some great points that there is a lot of lobbying against the industry because so many mega organization has monopolies on various consumer goods, pharmaceuticals, the tree industry, so the paper
Paper.
industry. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
and it's definitely going to take its fair share in the marketplace. And so
And I
um,
have a question for you. I'm going to
yeah, go
interview the
ahead.
interviewer, and you, since you work as a resume coach and you help people with their employment, what would you say are some qualities that these cannabis companies are looking for, whether it be manufacturing or processing or staffing? What are some qualities that you think make for a good candidate?
That's a great question. I think every company is a little bit different and it depends on the seniority. And so the cannabis industry does have seasonal harvesting multiple times a year. And so, like in Michigan, for example, where I'm more so based out of in the industry, it's a great opportunity for people to pick up a side job and make really good money because they do pay well. And so for that, for those seasonal type of jobs, they just want somebody, who's going to show up and be on time. You don't have to already know how to do it. They're expecting to be able to train. It's
Teach
just,
you. Hmm.
you'll come, like, great, let's put you to work. You can do this, and you can make some really good extra money doing it. And
Hmm.
so then from there on, from there, there's the more technical roles. So security is huge, and depending on the state, um, sometimes you can have firearms and sometimes you can't, depending on the state in terms of
Hmm.
transporting product and whatnot. And so there's a booming industry for physical security and transportation in the industry. And for that, obviously need clean record. A lot of the organizations that are popping up are veteran owned and like to support veterans or former first responders in terms of like police officers, paramedics, and things of that nature, because the training aligns well. And so leveraging that is a huge value add in that industry. In terms of more of the technical roles, there's so
Hmm.
many sensors, so much tech involved. So individuals who want to be in the tech industry, this is a way to open doors outside of those FANG organizations that everybody wants to be in, right? Something that a lot of entry level tech professionals don't think about, and it's a missed opportunity. I'm actually speaking later this evening to a guy named Kevin. We're both invested in helping entry level IT professionals break into the industry and
Mm.
breaking into cannabis organizations because they expect to have to train people because the technology is so new. The lights are so state of the art. It's constantly changing um, with that aspect of it. And so it's a great opportunity for people who don't necessarily come from a traditional background or want to transition their career to have an opportunity to get a foot in the door. And then at the executive level, um, the main thing I see there in terms of turnover is you have to be able to work in the gray.
Mm.
It isn't federally legal, and so you have to be able to feel comfortable that you're
Navigate in the gray, swim in the gray.
yep, you have to get
Hmm.
comfortable with those state laws and have to you have to be able to navigate things within a political arena. And so the political acumen, not only at the state level, but then also internally, because it is so much of a startup culture, that what typically works in corporate America with the hierarchy and things like that, you have to be able to pivot outside of that. And
Hmm.
um, a lot of cannabis startup owners don't like never came from this industry. You know, they might have been in finance, and so what do they know about it? And so it takes a lot of education, it takes a lot of patience to work in the industry, but then it also moves at lightning speed. And so at the
Yeah.
executive or senior level, it's going to take somebody who can really be dynamic in their role and wear multiple hats, because a lot of the organizations do work, even though there's a lot of money in it, because they're startups, people wear multiple hats. And in corporate settings at major organizations, most of the time people like stay in their lane.
Yeah, you know what I think is interesting, and what the fruitful relations that are coming from that is that, like, the stoners, the people who have literally been in the fields growing them for years, are now partnering with all these corporate executives to really legitimize the process. So it's funny how all these executives who used to judge all these people are now forced to collaborate with them, obviously for the sake of the greater good and the business and the prosperity. But it's just interesting to see how they're both coming together to the table. The stoner and the CEO sit together to make a plan and to make it fruitful.
I know, right? Gabe
Mm-hmm.
says, if all the cool kids are doing it.
Yes.
I know, right? And I love how so many people in the comments don't even smoke. And like for me, like I like the last thing I want to do is be tired, you know, like it's there.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's so many different strands and things like that of being in it, but one of on a closing note,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people within the cannabis industry don't have to even use cannabis to be in the industry. And
Mm-hmm.
so there are a lot of opportunities. I mean, anybody who's ever seen American Gangster movie knows, like, you don't use your product.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so, you know, like, you know, stoners and CEOs, or, you know, venture capitalists or private equity firms and things like that, they are coming together to figure out how to make this industry work. And so, when individuals are wanting to break into this industry, it would be nice for more people to recognize that you don't necessarily have to be a consumer to be involved in the industry. And if you are a consumer, that doesn't mean you're less than,
Equal
or
to.
you know what
Imagine the requirement is now you have to smoke. If you're THC not positive, can't hire you.
I
No, but no. I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. It's no longer a judging factor, a determining factor.
yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely not. And so, okay, so Isabella, how can people follow you? How can people support
Yes.
your efforts to educate individuals
Just
about
look me up, Cannabella, Canna Bella, on YouTube. Just type it into the search bar. You'll come across my videos, and you can keep up with me there. You guys will find all my contact links there. But yeah, it's been so much fun, Tegan. I'm honored.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. And I'm as soon as we jump off the live, I'm going to drop a link that Isabella sent me. She sent me an amazing resource for individuals who are
Yes.
looking to work in the cannabis space. A whole bunch of different companies, you know, that have sound financing, that are hiring. So I'll drop that in the link if you're interested in pursuing employment opportunities within the cannabis space. So for everybody who tuned in today, thank you so much. And for those of you who are looking for how to figure out how to break into the IT industry, I'm going to be going live again with Kevin, actually this evening at 6 p.m.
Nice.
Central Standard Time, to continue on this discussion on how we can get more people into, you know, these roles. So everybody in the comments, you're the shit. I appreciate the engagement. You all had so much fun. Appreciate you all. If you weren't able to catch this live, don't hesitate to watch the replay. It's going to be on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn,
Yes.
wherever
We're
you
going to
want.
repurpose this. This content will for sure be repurposed.
Yes, yeah,
Hmm.
Isabella will have our back with that. So, everybody, thank you so much. We will catch you later.